You know that feeling when you're playing a game with a lot of character dialogue and that little box pops up letting you pick a response, and you see that one unhinged, goofy answer and you just get overwhelmed with this morbid curiosity to pick that and see how the character responds, but then you chicken out and you pick the safe answer because it's more likely to lead to a good result in the game. Because that was me many times playing through the Scarlet and Violet DLC. And while these dialogue choices might not impact gameplay in the same way that they do in like the Persona series, I still found myself getting very invested in the characters and dialogue of the DLC, much more even than in the base game. I kept coming away from these cutscenes wondering, wait, what if I did pick that other option? What would they have said or done? But the thing that really sparked my curiosity and sent me down a deep rabbit hole searching through the game's script line by line was realizing that each of the gym leaders has special dialogue depending on who you picked as your favorite in the base game. And you don't get access to these interactions till the very end of the DLC. So it's not like you can easily save scum this and just like pick a gym leader and then go see what they have to say. You would literally have to play through the end of the base game and the entire DLC 8 times to see each of these dialogue options. And you might be thinking, like I did, oh, I can just look up these cutscenes on YouTube, right? I don't think you realize just how unpopular some of these gym leaders actually are. Like, nobody picked Kofu as their favorite gym leader. That footage just does not exist. So instead I had to hunt down a searchable version of the game script, and that's where things got really interesting. Because I now had the power to go through each and every dialogue choice in the game, during the story, all the side quests, even during the minigames. There are so many random and interesting and funny outcomes to each of these dialogue trees that I just had to put this video together, especially for all the people out there that wonder, just like me, what would have happened if I had said that other thing. And not only did I satisfy my curiosity, I also found some surprising things, like most of these dialogue options are fake. In the main story alone, a good half of these dialogue prompts just have no impact on the conversation. No matter what you pick, the outcome is the same, or it's just a very minor difference in response that's almost not even worth mentioning. And sometimes these are really easy to spot, you know, when both of your options are basically just different flavors of yes. But I couldn't believe that even some of the really big narrative moments that really feel like there should be a big difference, like when you can choose to either say something or nothing to Kieran after you beat him as a champion and he's just sitting there fuming, there's no difference. This cutscene just plays out the same way. So for the sake of this video, I'm only going to focus on the notable dialogue boxes, and we're going to start at the very beginning of the Indigo Disk DLC. Upon arriving at the Blueberry Academy, Director Cyrano asks if you have any questions about the Blueberry structure, and you're presented with these 3 options. And I think in a lot of games, this would be a situation where you could click on each option one at a time and hear all the different lore. But no, you only actually get access to one of these answers, because as soon as we do choose one of them, like why is the school underwater, your conversation gets interrupted by Lacey walking up and she answers the question instead of Cyrano, which is kind of like a cute narrative moment, but it also locks you out of getting the answers to those other questions, like why the name Blueberry, how did Cyrano and Clavel meet. So right out the gate, the game is already blocking you from getting certain character details and information, which regardless if you care about that information, I do think it's funny that it's very much in the spirit of a Pokemon game to make you choose between 3 options right at the start. And as we go through these dialogue options, my plan is to always leave them all on screen so you can read them if you're curious, and then of course you can also use the timestamps to find a part of the story or side quest that you're more interested in. Our next big decision comes when Lacey asks us which biome is our favorite. There are 4 detailed answers for each one of these options, but there is technically only one correct answer here, the coastal biome, which is Lacey's favorite. But if you did pick the canyon biome, congratulations, because you just unlocked one of the only mentions of a charge stone in the entire script. Next up, Carmen asks you if you missed her, and you can say either yes or no, and let's just say she has a particularly emotional reaction if you say no. You then go on to battle her, and this is the first case of special dialogue where if you pull out Ogerpon, she will also ask Ogerpon if she missed her. After this, she takes you to see your dorm room, and you're presented with these 3 options, but no matter which one you pick, she makes one thing very clear. She really wants you to come see her room. So take that for what you will. And that brings us up to the Elite Trials, where there are a lot of conditional dialogues that are easy to miss. Crispin especially has these 6 different responses depending on how spicy your sandwich was. 3 levels of passing, 3 fails. I'm not sure of the exact conditions for each response beyond just getting a perfect score or failing if you drop the actual ingredients. But the real fun element here is the extra cutscene that plays if you choose to toss the top half of your bread, where he wonders if maybe that's a Paldean thing? Amorous also has a few hidden dialogue options as part of the flying trial that I doubt many people would see, mainly because they're all related to fail states, and this trial is very hard to fail unless you're actively trying to. So the only way to actually fail is to not reach the goal within the time limit. And she does point this out the first time you fail, and then she repeats this message the next 3 times until you hit your 5th failure, at which point you unlock this special dialogue where she lets you skip the trial entirely. I now find myself strangely at a loss. We got it. Over the correct course of action. You failed my trial many times over, yes, but you always pick yourself up to try once more. That in itself can be considered more noble than reaching a goal within a set time. I disagree. I will count your numerous attempts at my trial as proof of your worthiness. You pass. And I think this is where like the game design really betrays the character writing, because I was under the impression that Amorous was a big stickler for the rules, which the writers kind of try to salvage by her adding this extra line of like, well, I'm not going to go easy on you in the battle, so don't get used to it. But hey, even if it undermines the character, you still gotta have this failsafe to let the kids who can't do the hoops get through it, right? And now we've arrived at my personal favorite trial, Lacey's Pokemon quiz. The structure of each of her questions is roughly the same, with each wrong guess triggering unique dialogue for that specific Pokemon. And then 2 wrong guesses triggers a trainer battle. And the flavor text for these battles are pretty funny, from shaming you for getting easy questions wrong to this extremely threatening one that I'll cry on my pillow so much I'll have to wring it out. Like, who hurt you, buddy? Relax. I'll leave up the full dialogue trees for each question up on screen in case you're curious. And I'm honestly impressed that there's very little recycled dialogue here for each of the responses. But the final question with Granbull does get some extra love, with Lacey going into great detail with each wrong body part that you pick. She even stops to think like, wait, yeah, what if I did let those hard fangs dig into my scalp while I was sleeping? Wouldn't that be invigorating? Okay, Lacey, yeah, very interesting lore drop. We're learning things about Lacey. And you might think that this is the end of the quiz, but after you finish battling Lacey, she does spring one final question on you, which does have only one right answer, because she will buzz you if you try to call her Pokemon cool or tell her she's cute. It's also worth noting here, depending on which order you beat the Elite Four, Drayton's dialogue will change in the cutscene that plays after you finish that 3rd fight, with a special bit of text referencing who your 4th and final battle is up against. And if you save him for last, he'll thank you for giving him the time to get ready. If Crispin or Amorous is the last fight, he'll essentially give you a veiled hint at what type to use against them. But if Lacey is your last fight, he'll simply warn you that she's not a pushover, which I'm assuming he's learned from experience as the resident manipulator. I smell previous failed attempts. And then lastly, we have Drayton's trial, which really doesn't have any special dialogue to it. It's mostly just battling NPCs, but I will say I did like this trial a lot. I thought the challenge was really fun. And then after this, Drayton asks if we're friends with Kieran, and if we hit him with the, well, sorta, we see a rare side of Drayton giving us actual practical life advice or consolation. And like, honestly, this is interesting because if Drayton's whole thing is manipulating the people around him, aka getting you all worked up to beat Kieran since he can't, you'd think he'd opt to use this as a moment to like escalate the drama between us and Kieran, but instead he just says, you know, friend drama's part of life, don't sweat it. Or maybe he's trying to make sure you don't analyze the drama too closely. Maybe he really is that good of a manipulator. And then of course, once you're actually fighting Kieran, this is where you can get some more special dialogue by pulling out Ogerpon. And then it's at the end of this fight where that moment happens that I referenced earlier, where Kieran is having his cute little mental breakdown, and you can either say something or say nothing. And again, I was so curious to see what these 2 different paths looked like, and they don't make any difference. Like, no matter what you do, Drayton just woofs. This next one's for the Rika fans out there that would be interested in the different flavors of her responses when you either try to apologize or make excuses for the unauthorized trip to Area Zero that you took in the base game. Then we fast forward a bit to Briar asking if you've used the elevator in Area Zero before, where saying yes just gives a basic response, but if you go with I think so, she spins up a theory that maybe being exposed to Area Zero has affected our memory. The joke's on her though. I beat the base game a year ago and my memory is in fact just bad. And then finally, after beating Terapagos, if you choose the option Don't Catch, Kieran says a little line that proves he might actually be a mature big boy now. And that's it for the base storyline. Everything is on rails from this point on until the credits, But now we can enter side quest territory, starting with the secret cutscene at the Crystal Lake. When the professor appears and asks, "Who are you?" you get two options. The first leading to a basic response of him not recognizing you, but the second, where you ask if he's an AI, seems to imply that he got the idea from you in this timeline, which of course begs the question, what about the timeline where players pick the first option and don't mention AI? Well, hold that thought because it gets better. When he asks about Miraidon, you get three choices, and each response is fairly generic or just restating things we already know. Remember, this is the real professor from before the events of the base game. But he does rudely dismiss your relationship with your buddy if you call him Precious, so that's fun. And then he asks some things about Briar, and both of these options don't contain any new info, but I'll be honest, I kind of forgot she was a descendant of Heath. So there you go. Thanks, game, for spelling that out for me. And finally, what happens if you say no when the professor asks to trade your copy of Briar's book with his copy of the Violet book? Now, depending on what you believe about the game's lore, this is a pretty insane choice to be giving the player. It's thought that this entire sequence is the central paradox of the story, revealing that it was in fact your character that gave the professor all the information they needed to build the time machine by giving him this white book. So giving the player the option to just say no here, would that break the paradox? Would the entire game just cease to exist? Was there ever a chance that this game, with music written by Toby Fox and a new area called the Underdepths, could have pulled off some kind of crazy Undertalean stunt, making this no option a powerful enough choice to actually lead to a game over screen? Maybe wipe your save data? Wouldn't that be cool? But no, I mean, we're talking about Game Freak here. No, saying no just has the professor ask you to reconsider, and then you are forced to say yes. So as cool as that would be though, and I promise we're gonna get back to the special dialogue soon, the other and more likely theory about what's going on in these games is that it's not a closed time loop with a clean cause and effect, but simply a series of multiple timelines and parallel universes. And I mean, come on, every single Pokemon game ever released does kind of support this theory because you're always getting two versions with just minor differences. In this case, it's, you know, a different school, different professor, different colors of the book. The professor even straight up says that this entire meeting could be occurring in a timeline not connected to his own. So you could argue that what you do here doesn't actually matter at all. Like, you might affect the timeline of this specific professor, but considering this is a hidden cutscene and one that a lot of players will probably miss anyway, it makes more sense that nothing you can do here is required to happen and is not necessary for your own timeline to occur. Except there is one thing that changes after you do this: the title screen, with the Violet book clearly highlighted. So take that for what you will. Could mean nothing, could mean everything. And I tried to go back to Briar to see if she has some sort of reaction to me trading away her book, but she just seems to disappear in the endgame. There is, however, some special dialogue with Arven if you talk to him with this much newer, crisper version of the Violet book. Though it's really not too special, because he basically just sees it and assumes that you took the older one from the library downstairs. Moving on to Perrin, the photographer, she has some special text as well, depending on if you held on to that Hisuian Growlithe that she gave you during the Teal Mask. Even if it's not currently in your party, she'll notice if you evolved it into an Arcanine, or she'll call you out if you don't have it anymore. She also calls you stinky, depending on if you brag about hitting 200 Pokedex entries, and if you claim not to recognize where the photos hints were taken, she gives you kind of a soft hint on their actual location. Next up is the Team Star side quest, and I was surprised to find there were actual different outcomes and reward levels depending on how well your tutoring session goes. I don't know why I thought this whole thing was just a linear sequence, because I guess they do seem to let you correct some of your wrong choices, but apparently all of these options do lead to different interactions. So before the actual tutoring starts, you're asked to go find Mela, and when she asks you what you're doing here, one of your options is to say, "I've come to raid your base." That just kind of sounds like a bad pickup line, but her response being, "Sorry pal, I'm not in the mood," doesn't really help the innuendo either. And then after Giacomo puts on some lo-fi beats to study to, that's not a joke, he does actually say that, we start the actual side quest. Each tutoring session has 3 different dialogue branches, 2 ways to get a good outcome and 1 bad. With Ortega's literature question, each response comes with unique dialogue from Giacomo, either supporting your choice or challenging your logic. If you guess wrong more than once, then Ortega just shoos you away. Atticus's session plays out the same way, same rules for each outcome, except instead of 3 choices right off the bat, the second good outcome is actually nested inside the wrong choice, with the game giving you a chance to second guess and correct your mistake. Aerie has some pretty lengthy responses to each of these choices, including a very inspiring pep talk if you do go for that nested good option. In Mela's session, you don't have a third person chiming in, and most of the answer variations are pretty straightforward, but there is one option select in here that actually made me belly laugh when I read it, because she asks you, how important do you think dreams are? And she specifically tells you not to laugh, and then of course they give you the option to laugh in all caps, and I couldn't resist. You know, I'm here to select the risky options and take the damage so you don't have to. Picking this route obviously ends the conversation immediately, but if you do give her a proper answer, then you are treated to a full series of dialogue splits that amount to a very poignant character moment. And then the game checks how many tutoring sessions you failed and then determines what reward you get. So the best is a golden bottle cap, a mid result is wise glasses, and then you just get a can of lemonade if you suck. Next up is the League Club room, and this ended up being one of my favorite parts about the DLC. As I said before, all the special dialogue with the gym leaders is one of the main reasons I wanted to make this video in the first place. We'll start with the responses of them being picked as your favorite, but there's also a lot of branching dialogue in their normal conversations as well, so we'll get into all of that. First up is Iono's response, and I have such a love-hate relationship with this character, because while I do take damage hearing these heavily millennial-coded words like friendo and bonkeriest, I also do love a good cringe, so I have to appreciate her. And I debated if I should read this response to you out loud word for word, but I'm choosing to be merciful, so just read hers at your own risk. And next up we have Tulip. Her response is pretty basic, but she is the only gym leader to call you her favorite back, so that's pretty nice. And then Rhyme seems very surprised that you picked her as her favorite, but then also kind of like brags about being popular, so I don't know. She also calls it a shout out, which is kind of funny. But Grusha, on the other hand, seems legitimately upset that you picked him as your favorite. Straight up says, so uncool, seriously. Like, I genuinely feel bad for all the Grusha fans out there if this was your payoff, or maybe you guys are into it, I don't know. And then Katie is just very Katie. She calls you sweet and offers you cupcakes. Me and Katie are big homies though. I'm gonna take this chance to just say that she shares my grand vision of turning all Pokemon into bugs. So I kind of wish I had picked her as my favorite the first time around. And on the subject of favorites, I assume most of you have already seen Larry's response to getting picked, because either you picked him yourself or saw screenshots and videos of this interaction going around. And yeah, he basically says he does not understand why you picked him. He suggests that you might be mentally ill and suggests that you go touch grass. God, I love Larry. And then Kofu essentially just laughs in your face and friend zones you. Not much else to say about this one. I'm convinced that nobody picked Kofu as their favorite, and I don't even hate him. I just think the other gym leaders are so much more interesting. And I didn't really care for Brassius much either, but I know he's got fans. His over-the-top response is pretty fun though, and the way he uses your name and just slaps a guard at the end of it, like Gabe Guard, how perfectly artistic of him. So that's what each gym leader says if you pick them as your favorite. I just want to shout out Mixeli's video on this, because this footage did not exist when I started working on the video, and I was just gonna have to recreate all of these. And there's a lot more fun dialogue between all the gym leaders and other characters in the League Club, but none of them have branching or missable text, so I'm not gonna cover them in this video. But if you are curious, Mixeli also has a video covering all of those conversations, so I recommend going over there to watch that. But there is a lot of missable dialogue in the one-on-one conversations that you have with characters, like Amorous misunderstanding one of your answers to mean that maybe you and Kieran are a couple, which she quickly backpedals on, or how you can help Brassius realize that he was not in fact inside of an art gallery in Castelia City, as he was getting wrapped up in webs in Berg's gym. And as if cringing at Iono's dialogue wasn't already fun enough, she actually has a couple easily missable dialogue trees depending on which of the 3 answers you pick when she asks you what should she stream during her visit. Like, God forbid you miss her saying Neato or referencing YouTube top 10 lists. But this choice also affects the next time you invite her back, where she will update you on the results of the pick. And then there's this line from Rhyme calling herself a DJ G Randma. If you tell her that you're not surprised she's good with kids, and I just love the term G Randma. And then you have Tulip absolutely dunking on Brassius for no reason if you guess her profession wrong, and she might also have a thing for flight attendants. And then there's Clavel getting offended if you tell him that the Blueberry Academy's director is your favorite part about the school. He has some detailed responses to the other 3, but nothing too noteworthy, and as far as I know, this choice does not come into play later on. And then Gita reveals that she has other reasons for accepting your invitation, including business with the Unova League and matters to address with Dr. Sirona, which might just be flavor text, but I feel like there could be something going on here. She also asks you to recommend a trainer in a similar fashion to her question about the favorite gym leader in the base game, and each response includes a good amount of detail for the 6 character options, so here's each one of those in full. And in case you missed the references that Drayton and Lacey have parents that were gym leaders back in Unova, Gita is here to point that out for you. There's even some hyper-specific dialogue for every guest coach once you unlock their Pokemon trade. And you may already know that you can't give coaches a shiny or rare Pokemon or one that was traded to you already, but they will warn you with a custom written line if you try to trade a Pokemon in your party if you have less than 2 Pokemon in your party already. I won't linger on any of these for too long, but I'll have them on screen in case you want to see any character response in particular. I'm just impressed they took the time to add this bit of flavor text for each character when it's just such a rare case. I don't know, it just seems like this could have easily been covered by like a simple system message like, you cannot trade unless you have at least 2 Pokemon. And I'll bet most of you guys didn't even know that after you trade Pokemon with these coaches, if you invite them back again, they give you a cute little update about the Pokemon that you gave them. Again, I'm not going to read all of these. You can pause on whichever one you want to see, but this is just like a really refreshing amount of detail being put into character writing in this game. I love it. The coaches will even sometimes ask you about the Pokemon that they gave to you. And while most of these are pretty generic, Larry drops this absolute banger dad joke when he asks about his Dunsparce. You know, because it's like a flying type, so it's a Dunsparce, like air. I love Larry. And then I'm sure a lot of people probably missed the special dialogue when you lose against each coach, because their battles aren't really that hard. But if you want to see those, again, I'm just going to recommend going to Mixeli's channel and watch what happens when you lose to everyone video. And that's pretty much all the dialogue you probably missed while playing the Indigo Disk. And if you like this kind of video, I might even consider going back through the main game or even the Teal Mask to kind of explore the alternate dialogue options there. But I just felt like there was so much in the Indigo Disk specifically that really interested me, and I knew this video was going to be really hard to make, so I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew, even though this video still ended up being a lot bigger, even with me like skipping through dialogue and just leaving it on screen. And if you want to support me being able to make longer deep dive videos like this, the best way to do that is to check out the links in the description. I multi-stream on many platforms, so you can always come in to say hi, see what game we're playing next. And while I don't have a Patreon set up yet, I might consider it if there is a demand for this specific kind of video, because I like making them, but they take a lot of time. And then of course, if you want to support me directly, you can go to my link tree and use any of the methods in there. I also have a promo code SUPER for G Fuel if you're into that sort of thing. But in the meantime, I'm just super interested in this stuff in general when I'm playing a game. Like right now I'm playing through Persona 3 Reload, and it's killing me not being able to easily know what each option actually results in. So this could be a thing, could be fun. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.